From family events to volunteer opportunities to community happenings, there is a lot going on in your community. Learn about all the possibilities and opportunities on this episode of Community Hotline.
Hi, and welcome to Community Hotline. My name is Monica Weitzel. We're here at MetroEast Community Media in Gresham, Oregon. Tonight we have a couple of great groups on with us tonight. I'm going to start with Larry Morgan. Larry is the founder, one of the founders, and the president of Students for America's Future, also known as SAFPAC. Larry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Monica, for
nice
this
to
opportunity.
have you here. Yes. Now, Larry, you have been to MetroEast before. I remember, what was it, a couple of years ago, you were one of our basketball announcers.
Correct.
When we started basketball coverage. So you've got a little, you've been on camera before. You know how that all works.
A couple times.
But you also, if you don't mind, I'd like to just talk about you for a minute before I start talking about SAFPAC, because you kind of have an interesting background. You were the president at Mount Hood Community College.
Correct.
And you're the first African American to be elected to that position.
Correct.
As well as one of the youngest.
The youngest, yes.
The youngest, which is quite a big deal. I remember reading about you in the paper before I ever met you when that happened. So that's a great start right there. But then also you have, tell me about what else, you're now a student at Wheaton College?
Wheaton College, correct, in Illinois.
Yes, and what are you studying there?
Majoring in American history, so the focus there, and then minor in communications.
Okay, good. Now you've also have some background working with politics and political candidates.
Correct.
Okay, tell me a little bit about that.
So the past few years I was able to work with then Senator Barack Obama's presidential campaign, and that worked out pretty well at the time. But I was also tapped right after I was elected student body president to work with the governor, Kitzhopper's, on his transition team. I was the only student in the state to be able to do that. So I got to work on the post-secondary education budget. We got to work on a lot of financing for college students and things like that, and was able to kind of brush shoulders with some of the premier people in the state on public policy. Wow. And then from there, I worked on a couple more campaigns, and then I was just the most recent campaign manager for Scott Hansen for state senate locally here. So.
Wonderful. So how did you get into that? What prompted you to get into working in the public sector, working with people that are running for public office and the whole political machine? What started that?
I just always wanted to be something different and try to get in there and get involved. And so they say all politics is local, and so I met with Mayor Kite and kind of thought, how can I get involved? And then I decided to run for student body president. And then the governor attended a couple of rallies at our school, and we almost had the strike, which we prevented at Mountain Community College, and we're active involved in that. And so it's just kind of progressed one after another. And this past summer, I just got back from Israel on an international advocacy mission with a couple of organizations as well. So it's just kind of come full circle. So
what do you intend to do with all this?
I'd love to come back here eventually to the Northwest and kind of be that change you wish to see in the world. So if that's, being a teacher, or that's working locally with some political officials, or just empowering people to find their voice and to make the change that would be good for the future, but also for this community.
Which brings us to SAFPAC, Students for America's Future. You were one of the founders of this organization.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit about what the mission is and what the purpose is of this organization.
So the mission is in two parts. The first part is the advocacy. So we see a lot of things as college students, recent graduates, 50% unemployment, youth unemployment is about 16%. And so we want to find a way where we can get students, but also people who are conscientious of the future, empowered in politics. So that's the advocacy part. And the second part is working with local candidates and working with candidates, promote candidates who are, again, conscientious of the future, so we can get them elected and kind of see that change that's really important for America's future.
How do you go about encouraging students, kids, to actually get involved? Because when I was a teenager, I don't think my mind was very much on politics. That didn't come till later. And I know there was the Bus Project, which I think is a great organization for getting people involved. But how do you go about getting kids and getting students interested in that?
Well, I think the first part is education, seeing the difference between being political and seeing the difference between politics. And so what we've done is we've just made it simple, common sense. It's not about an R or a D or an I. It's really about the issues and finding that common ground and finding the interest that people have for it. And that's one of those things where it strikes a chord across all party lines. And so that's been the first part. And the other part is letting people know that they have a story. Letting them know that they fit into this big piece and finding where they fit in. Some people have interests, in policy, but some people just have interests in the future, and some people have interests in minor details. And just finding where they fit into that whole continuum is kind of what we try to do.
So if somebody were interested in getting involved in the whole process, making a difference, what's your advice to them as far as how to get started?
Yeah, I mean, again, all politics is local, and so what I've been able to do is work with Mountain Community College and their student government. And so we got some people in Rockwood who had not really been involved in politics, hadn't been ever registered to vote, and we saw that they fit in and they had a place at the table. And so there's local aspects. You had mentioned the bus project. That's another big thing. And so what we're doing at SAPX, we're trying to find that avenue and create that forum for people to kind of rally together.
And this is not associated with any party,
nope,
any political
non-partisan, unconnected PAC.
I was reading something about it, and it talked about ultra-partisanship. What do you mean by ultra-partisan? Instead of non-partisan, it's ultra-partisan. So what is the difference there?
I think we've seen deeply ensconced or entrenched political ideologies, Tea Party or no party or her party or what have you. And so we see there's a deep divide. But if you read most studies, both political ideologies are only separated on a few issues. And so we're going to throw out a lot of those issues, but we're going to focus on the things we actually can change. Somebody once told me the main thing is that the main thing always remains the main thing. And so we want to just keep the focus there on issues that we can have control over and issues that we actually feel that we can change.
What kinds of issues have you personally worked on, or what kinds of issues are you currently involved in?
Yeah, I think the most crucial issue right now as a student is the student debt crisis. It's not really talked about, but it's just surpassed over $1 trillion, and they say that it's more than credit card debt and auto loan debt combined.
Wow.
And so that's one issue. Another thing is...
It's pretty darn scary when you graduate from school, don't have a job, yet you have all that debt.
Yeah, and a couple of economists just came out with a report that said 50% of recent graduates are unemployed. And if you look at certain minority groups, youth unemployment is 16%. That's twice the national average. And so those are just a few issues that we feel that we can change at SAPAC. We aren't naive and think we can change the world, but we think we can start with one person at a time.
Oh, that's good. That's the way to start it. So what else? What else is important?
I think, we obviously Social Security, but I also think about the national debt. This generation, again, baby boomers and the greatest generation have done us a great service. But we also feel that there are some great tasks to still be fought. And that's going to hit my generation. And so that, I think, is a big issue with us, and we want to start that conversation locally would be great, but getting the ball rolling and having that dialogue again without the partisan gridlock.
Right. When kids graduate from college and they don't have a job, and it takes them a while to get going. A lot of times they end up in the lower paying jobs. You want to encourage people to go into a public office and to make a change that way, but it seems to me that the people that are able to go into public office so often are those that are financially comfortable. So how do you get people into public office if they're at that lower income range? Because really, it's pretty difficult. You see it with the presidential campaign, obviously, but in a lot of other even local campaigns, it takes a lot of money to get somebody into office a lot. So do you think it's worth the effort?
I know it's worth the effort. And they say, I think 75% of Congress went to 40 elite schools, at least 40 schools. And so there is that aspect, but I think it just takes one. It takes that group or that dreamer, or what have you, that believes that you can do it. And then everybody kind of falls in line and goes, okay, we can follow this drumbeat. That's what SAPEC's trying to be. It's trying to be kind of that innovator, that person, the group that can say, we can make that change. So to those people who, again, are underemployed or unemployed after all that, It's a big issue, and I think that we're seeing some policies now coming out with the pay ratio out of college. You know, that you pay back your student loans based on what you're paying. That's a great policy. That's good. Yeah. That's innovative. And I think that people from both sides of the aisle can get behind stuff like that, and that's really what we want to push. But there is that that thing to overcome, that glass ceiling to shatter, and we know it's there, but we're not afraid of taking it on.
I like that. So tell me, what kinds of things does Students for America's Future do? I mean, obviously you're trying to do these things, but in what ways?
So this last election cycle, we were able to kind of observe a lot of the things that were going on. We had just gotten started just recently, but there was a candidate who had just recently graduated from the University of Montana. Young gal, great speaker, and she ended up winning. And we were able to follow her campaign all the way through. She is going to be, I think, depending on what ends up happening, a ranking member in the House, in the Montana Assembly. And so kind of being a part of that campaign and a know-nothing, at least what society had said, and how can she know that she just graduated from college, and she, again, broke that glass ceiling. We can point to stories like that. Again, it's just a story, but seeing and things like that. Another big thing is we were able to go back to Chicago, where I attend school, and meet with a couple of national organizations, nonprofits, political organizations, and they are very interested in working with us. They have names, they have some senators right now and some House members who are working on their campaigns, but they're interested in what we have to say because of the fact that we don't come with political baggage on either side of the aisle.
Right.
And so just identifying that you are, again, not here to throw mud, but you're here to bring solutions and bring people together, I think resonates across the aisle. But I think most importantly is, I think people like Jen in Montana or people in Chicago, I think that people want to be a part of something, and I don't think that politics as a whole is as off-putting as it's been, and that's what we want to change. Agree.
Okay, so if somebody were interested in becoming involved with SAFPAC, what is involved in doing that? What do they need to do?
Exactly. So, of course, you can go to safpac.org, which is safpac.org, and look at the membership aspects. Two of the big 2013 initiatives we're doing is one with the college campuses. Right now we represent with FAMU, Florida A&M University, with Wheaton College, Mountain Community College, a couple of colleges in the Northwest, a little bit over 120,000 students on campuses across the country. Again, not as active as we would like, but it's still a start.
But you're still new. You're very new, so
it's still
you got to start somewhere.
So that's one thing. But it's just identifying what people have an interest in. I mean, not everybody wants to lobby. Not everybody wants to write their senator or talk to their senator. Some people just want to, write stories or blog or detail certain local issues that are going on in their communities.
Right.
So just identifying a problem is the start, and then communicating it with us is I think the solution.
So do you help people identify the problem, or just kind of assist them to identify the problem, and then show them ways to either blogging or writing their senator? I mean, do you provide ideas on how to become involved?
Yeah. So again, specifically with Florida A&M, they had a huge issue with voter registration and some of the laws, and we all heard about that throughout the process. So we were able to talk with some people down there about what are some laws and how can you do that. So they were able to talk to the local officials. It turned out in the election, the voting wasn't an issue, the registration wasn't an issue. And so that was something that was identified, a problem, communicated, and then solved through students advocating, which again is this bare minimum, but it's taking that extra step beyond identifying the problem to address the solutions.
Now, since you're pretty much all over the country, I mean, in very...
Not me, but
I mean, the SAFPAC is
correct.
In different locations all over the country. You don't have meetings, do you? Or how do you?
We have our board, so our general board, which is made up of the executive staff, who meets and talks about pertinent issues, candidates we would potentially want to endorse. Somebody's writing an op-ed right now about foreign aid, national debt, things like that, but not specifically.
So somebody can become involved simply by becoming a member online.
Correct.
And being involved that way.
Correct.
So you don't need to take your time to go out to meetings. You can kind of do it and become involved as little or as much as you want. Is that right?
I like to use my grandma. She's 92 years old. She sits at home. She reads the newspaper, does her crossword puzzle every day. But she's just as engaged, doesn't have a computer or a smartphone.
Right.
But if she can be involved, at 92 years old, anybody can be involved.
Well, and older generation, we learned about politics, we learned about current issues by reading the newspaper, by watching the news on TV. Now there's a lot more ways for people to become engaged. Obviously, the computer and the internet has made the world much smaller, and people can learn a lot more. How do you encourage, or what do you encourage students to do to find out more about current issues? I mean, do you steer them towards certain areas that you think are dependable information?
Yeah. Well, I think the first part is there's already built-in kind of machines. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just trying to enable and encourage people and empower people that this is their future and they should care, either directly or indirectly. So one avenue we've used, is the student governments. That's the college avenue. Another way is we're using the local governments, the senators and the House members, and the state governments. And that was really productive here in the last legislature in Oregon, where it was split. And they had to work together, one way or another, which is not the ideal situation. But hey, they did, and they passed a lot of comprehensive things in education and things like that. So that's what I would say about that.
I was reading something about how you think that everybody should be able to achieve the American dream. Is that right? What do you consider the American dream? What is that to you?
Wow.
What is it to you personally?
I think for me as an African American, and there's been a lot of opportunities given to me, whether it be through financial aid or other things like that. I just think that SAPAC really preaches we want to have equal opportunity, but not necessarily equal outcomes.
Okay.
Now, what in the world does that mean? Exactly. Explain that to me. We know that there are some people that want to be police officers, people that want to be teachers, people that want to have an aspiration to be rich, or people that want to be a pro basketball player. But to not be given that opportunity, we feel is not fair, and it's not right, and it's not what we were founded on.
Right.
But we don't want everybody to be a teacher, or everybody to be LeBron James, or everybody to be
That'd be no
you
fun.
or I.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that the opportunity that was afforded to you, afforded to me, or afforded to President Obama or George W. Bush or whomever it might be, is available for the next generation. And that's really what we're concerned about as we see these trillion-dollar debts and these ongoing fights and this party and her party and the Tea Party and all these discussions that really don't get to the issues. They just distract us from what really can be, we feel, solutions.
So really the point is the American dream is about choices and opportunities and the ability to achieve what it is you personally want. So you talked about voting. Obviously, registering to vote is huge. That's very important. Getting started possibly with your student government in your high school, if you're in high school, and then in college, that's a good place to start if you want to become involved in making a change. I would think that would be a good entry point, for people. What other things can kids do to become involved?
Well, one thing I just want to make sure that I communicate is, it is politics, but this is not political.
Right.
I understand that some people have turned off and go, I don't want to be involved whatsoever. But the most important thing, what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, no matter how you slice it, this is going to affect your life in some avenue.
Right.
And it's better to be on the front end than on the back end. But I think that there's a lot of ways to get involved. But I would say specifically, identifying that you have a story, again, writing an op-ed or writing a letter or empowering yourself, whatever that might be to that person. But we feel that SAPAC is a way to kind of coalesce around an issue or issues and educate people about some important issues we feel are on the forefront of our nation.
So again, SAFPAC is www.safpac.org, SAFPAC.
Exactly.
Okay, and people can go to that website, check it out, become involved if they want to, or just get more information.
Exactly.
We're almost out of time. Anything else you want to share with our viewers before I let you go, Larry?
Again, thank you, Monica, for the opportunity. MetroEast has always been hospitable to us and to me, and I appreciate that chance.
Well, I think you have a great future. You're on your way. You're doing great things. So congratulations on making a difference already, Larry.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching this first segment of Community Hotline. We'll be right back with the Jesuit volunteers, and we're sure you don't want to miss that. So we'll be right back.
Volunteers are the cornerstone of local communities, and they enjoy the satisfaction that comes from being part of something larger than themselves. Multnomah County invites citizens to participate in projects that benefit the greater good of our residents.
Want to help homeless animals? There are countless volunteer opportunities with Multnomah County Animal Services.
There's always a lot to do when caring for almost 10,000 animals a year. Our shelter is at the forefront of animal care with some of the most progressive programs in the nation, and we depend on volunteers to keep those programs running.
From showing cats to potential owners, to training dogs in the shelter, to fostering a shelter pet in your home, you can help your community by volunteering your time and talents with Animal Services.
To find out more about this volunteer opportunity, visit their website. To explore other volunteer opportunities, contact the Office of Citizen Involvement. Shape your community. Volunteer.
KZME Radio is a new station that is committed to entertain, inspire, and connect our community through programming that celebrates local music, arts, and culture. It was created to put local music and local arts on local radio, and it is a vehicle for our creative community to gain exposure while also celebrating what the Portland metro area has to offer.
Hey folks, I'm Mike Midlow from the band Pancake Breakfast. What's so cool about KZME? Well, it's local music. You know, you can't go to every live show. Believe me, I've tried. So you can tune into KZME and hear a bunch of music that you might not get to see otherwise. Why should you support KZME? Well, it's pretty obvious. I mean, if you like Portland Town, USA, homegrown music, independent radio, and if you believe in the powers of rock and roll, then contribute to KZME. It's music where you live.
My favorite thing about community media is how people find their voice and tell their story.
It's the message of, by, and for a community.
We're a gathering place because it gets people of all sorts of different backgrounds underneath one roof.
It's art, it's technology.
A snapshot of our community.
Going live. In 3, 2, 1.
The League of Women Voters makes history.
Our country would not be the same without their dedication.
Formed by women who organized to win women the right to vote.
It is now a co-ed organization.
Studying, informing, and acting.
Nonpartisan.
Grassroots.
Influential.
Taking political stands on many issues.
The League of Women Voters encourages all citizens to be informed and active in government.
Join the League of Women Voters of East Multnomah County in making its history today.
Hi, I'm Luke Perry. You're watching MetroEast. Over 25 years of great community media.
Alone, our reach is limited. No matter how great our intentions, on our own, we can only stretch so far. But at Rotary, we believe the right group of people working together can make our communities, our world, a better place. Rotary, humanity in motion.
¿Están listos?
Hotline. My name is Monica Weitzel, and we are here with the Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest. Happy to introduce you to Ian Rober, who's a recruiter. Yep. Thanks, Ian, for being here. Right. And Liz Purdy, the Outreach and Events Coordinator at JVC Northwest. Yes. Liz and I met at an event. It was a nonprofit kind of networking thing about diversity. A little while ago, we started talking and realized that this might be an interesting topic for Community Hotline. So I'm glad you came on here today and follow it up. Much. So Jesuit Volunteer Corps. Who wants to tell me a little bit of the history of it? Ian, do you want to start with that? Maybe can you give me a little history, maybe what the mission is and and how it all came about?
Sure. It's an old program, so we started around 1956, and it started with the Jesuits actually starting.
You weren't there then, were you?
I was not there, no, just a few years.
Yeah.
Away. The Jesuits started a few missions actually in Alaska, and they just kind of started recruiting a few students here and there to help them, number one, build the schools, and number two, be the educators at these schools.
And the Jesuits were the priests.
Correct,
right,
correct.
Okay.
Kind of overseeing these missions. That was a big hot spot back then for education. So that's kind of our roots. From there, there's a lot of developments that went on throughout the 60s and 70s, ultimately moving us to Portland and calling us the Jesuit Volunteer Corps.
So is this the main headquarters here in Portland? It is.
So it started in that region and then has since expanded. So throughout the 70s and 80s, it expanded to the East Coast, the Midwest, even internationally. Ultimately having different kind of regions, you'll call them, separate and become kind of their own offices. And that's kind of how we became Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest.
And Northwest covers, Liz, what areas does that cover?
We're in the 5 states of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Alaska.
Okay. Now, you both actually were Jesuit volunteers before you were hired to work for the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. Liz, what did you do?
So I served in Sitka, Alaska at a domestic violence shelter as a women's advocate. So it meant walking alongside women who were experiencing crisis or maybe were in shelter for a period of time with their families, and just trying to offer what tools and resources we had to help them get situated in better circumstances.
Wow. Okay, I bet that had some interesting aspects to it.
Absolutely. It was a year of a lot of learning. And
for you?
For me, absolutely, yeah. And so I spend my 40 hours a week there working at the shelter. And that was the partner agency that I was matched with, that we as Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest match the Jesuit volunteers with. So you're essentially like a full-time employee, but you're serving as a volunteer through us, but at this local agency that are already serving and meeting the local needs of the people in those communities.
That's a good way to do it. What about you, Ian?
Yeah, we were actually JVs the same year in Alaska. That was my second year. My first year was in Boise, Idaho, and I worked at a homeless day facility called Corpus Christi House. Essentially the one place for the homeless to really be at in Boise during the day.
Really?
Especially
and Boise's fairly large city.
Yeah, it's a couple 100,000.
One place?
Yeah, a pretty sizable homeless community, and they really didn't, especially in the winter, didn't really have a place to go. Libraries, those kind of places, very kind of touch and go in terms of having those populations be there. So originally it was opened as a place for them to just have somewhere they can call home, as well as develop that community. And so I basically did anything and everything that needed to be done to keep that running, whether it was handing out bus passes or breaking up fights or those kind of things.
Wow.
And like Liz said, it really came down to the term of accompaniment, or walking alongside people and really building those relationships that allow you to kind of move their lives forward through services. And so I really liked that year, did a second year. I was in Juneau, Alaska, so about 90 to 100 miles away from Sitka where she was at. And I also worked in the domestic violence field. I worked with men who had actually committed the offenses.
Ah, so you're on the other side.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, opposite sides of the coin, really.
Yeah, I was actually attracted to that position because that was a very rare thing to see, was a program meant to be working with the men that while they're in prison, usually they go to prison and that's the end of that part of the story. But it was a class based on really sociological concepts about violence, where it comes from, and talking with them for 52 weeks about where their stories have come from and their use of violence has come from. And it was actually part of a court order program, so they also had to be there.
Yeah,
So there was a little bit of legal work throughout the week as well in their cases.
You find you build relationships, actual relationships with the people you worked with, and maybe become friends with some of them, or do you have to separate that and try to
there's definitely, you learn and kind of, I think, spend the year getting to know your boundaries and what you can offer people. I think a lot of what I did was listening, and sometimes people are not ready to receive maybe like a tool to implement to change something. Sometimes they just want their story to be heard. And a lot of the time it's just being able to be there and be an ear or a sounding board, and offer just someone to be with rather than to take action right away.
That makes sense. Well, as you mentioned something about partnering with another nonprofit organization. Is that what you usually do?
Yes.
Is that how it's set up? So tell me a little bit, maybe, let's tell me a little bit about how that works. So say, Well, what are some of the different programs or different things that you do with the Jesuit?
Sure.
Corps?
So here in the Portland area, we actually have 4 houses. There are 2 in Portland, 1 in Hillsborough, and 1 in Gresham. And our volunteers live in communities of 3 to 8 people. And then each of those volunteers will then go to their social service agency for their full day of work. And that looks different depending on what location you're in. So you've heard a little bit about Boise and Alaska, but here in the Portland area, we partner with agencies like Join, Street Roots, Sisters of the Road, Wallace Medical Concern are all places where our JVs are serving 40 hours a week and getting to know the clients, and at least 80% of their time is spent in direct service. So face-to-face with a client every day, getting their needs met at whatever level that looks like.
Yes. You know, we have a short video that you provided that kind of gives the story of one Jesuit volunteer. So I think maybe we should take a look at that now, and then we'll get back to some more details here.
Great.
Okay, let's take a look at that.
My name is James Antonio, and I'm a Jesuit volunteer in Portland, Oregon, and my service placement is with Operation Night Watch. Operation Night Watch is a night ministry that operates on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights from 7 to 11 p.m. And what we do is we welcome guests from all walks of life, homeless or not, mentally healthy or mentally ill. We've kind of made a reputation for being the living room of downtown Portland, so everybody's welcome. My role here at Operation Night Watch is the program coordinator, and a lot of what I do is running the hospitality center, but that is a lot. One of my duties as program coordinator is creating relationships, making friendships. Homelessness is more than just houselessness. It's lacking friendships. It's lacking those significant relationships with people. So I think that's the main impact that we make at Operation Night Watch is making relationships. There are definitely moments where I just felt like I really don't know what I'm doing. There are your low times, and there are also the very joyous times. One of the big joys of JVC Northwest is seeing the work that you do and what impact you have on people. If I had any advice for anybody doing JVC Northwest, it's just to be open. Open with other people, open to different experiences. It's been just a great adventure, and I don't regret any moment of it. I've really enjoyed my experience with JVC Northwest, and it's made a big difference in my life.
You're gonna get a lot of that.
So that kind of gives us an idea of what we heard what you did on your year, and is it always a year that
it is a year-long program?
But you can sign up again.
Yes, you can do an additional year, but it's always generally we start in August and then it finishes the next July.
Okay.
And so a lot of people will ask if we have kind of an in-between program, a summer program. At this point, that's a solid year, but you can do an additional year.
So where do you find the people to do this, and how do people find out about it, and how do they get involved?
And that's a lot of what I do now.
Yeah, you're the recruiter.
I'm the recruiter.
Yeah, so tell me about that, Ian.
So I spend most of the year traveling to colleges and universities, talking with students about my experience and about our program as well. They come from all different schools. They come from all different kinds of, I guess, places in those schools. A lot of the
backgrounds, walks of life.
Yeah, yeah, and some people just find us without my position as well. I mean, that's very common, but usually the people that apply are someone that's interested in living a year intentionally in a lot of different ways. They might have experience with service that might have kind of inspired them to do that, or they may not. And the stories just kind of keep coming in terms of how people get there. But my job is hopefully being a resource out in the world throughout the year and being able to answer questions, because really this kind of back and forth interaction is really the best way to learn about something. So
when you say living intentionally, explain what you mean by that.
Sure, yeah, it's a big word in our program. She touched on a little bit talking about community and our jobs, but a lot of it requires you to be present at your placement and with the people that you're serving. But a lot of this program too is living in that community, and that's a really big distinguishing part of our program compared to some other postgraduate service programs. And these are people that you haven't met before. They're from all over the country. You get a little bio page and there they are, and you're going to live with them for a year.
Wow.
And suddenly you find that you use the sponge at the sink differently, and you have to navigate through those issues of like how do we reconcile this? Who's clean? Who's dirty in the house? And you're on the same finances, the same utilities, those kind of things.
And it's probably at a pretty low level as far as finances. Am
Yes.
I right?
So one of the things that makes Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest unique compared to other volunteer programs is that we ask Jesuit volunteers to live by 4 values. And those, which we've touched on a little bit, are community, simple living, spirituality, and social and ecological justice. And so that's why we live in community, and we work with a community budget to talk about maybe we're buying this kind of peanut butter this week, or maybe we're getting this kind of milk, but it's making decisions around simplifying our lifestyles and our budgets and our travel. We do also offer 3 retreats each year that Jesuit volunteers get to attend, and they get to join with other volunteers that are in their region. So all of Alaska gets to get together 3 times a year, and during each of those weekends kind of step away from the service that you're doing and have a chance to reflect. One retreat will be on community, one on social and ecological justice, and one on spirituality, to dig deeper into those values and find out what does it mean to be living intentionally this year with those as a guiding principle.
So what did you learn from it personally? Can you share that? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot that you could share, but...
Need another hour.
Yeah, and I know I don't have that much time, but how did it change you?
Well, that's one of the things that I think my job in the office actually as outreach and events coordinator is to work with our former volunteers. And sometimes that means hearing their stories and the ways that they were impacted consistently, whether the volunteer finished their service a year ago or 30 years ago. We hear that it was a transformative year that guided and shaped the rest of their lives. And so I think for me personally, one thing that I walked away with was just the value of listening. And I kind of mentioned that before in service, that was a big part of what I did, but also in community and going into a new place. You know, a lot of prospective volunteers look at this year as a chance to go somewhere new. It's part of the lure of the Northwest if you're from another part of the country. And so you go somewhere new and you're not part of that community yet. You're welcomed into that community, certainly. You get a chance to listen and to learn, and I think the value of hearing those stories and then being able to engage in a deeper, more meaningful way is probably something that I'll take with me from this year for the rest of wherever else I end up going.
So when somebody decides to become a Jesuit volunteer, do they get to choose where they go, or are they assigned?
You know, I navigate this question a lot, and so people want to know, can I go to Alaska right away? The way the process works is we really ask people to have kind of an openness about where they're headed. While at the same time, throughout the application, there are questions that are going to be geared towards what do you like to do? Like, where are your desires at? Because that helps us kind of do that placement piece. A lot of it depends on when you apply. So our deadline every year is March 1st, and so if you apply before that, by that priority deadline, you have more options in terms of to begin with. But a lot of it comes down to being able to speak well about your passions, but also being open to maybe something else that challenges you that year.
I imagine that no matter where you go, you're still going to gain a lot from it personally, and hopefully give a lot too. Hopefully be able to make a difference. What about you, Ian, personally? What motivated you to join Jesuits?
It's a great question. It comes a little bit from what Liz was saying. So I attended Gonzaga University and got a lot of great opportunities to do service and ministry work, but it was always very short. And you always left with this feeling of like, these relationships are not quite formed yet by the time I leave that alternative spring break trip or something like that. And so I was looking for something that was really intentional, but really authentic. And I think I really found that in my first year placement, especially working with people in situations of poverty as my supervisor said, there's no mask. You know, no one hides a mask. When you're tired, you're tired. When you're angry, you're angry. And I got to see all those emotions, and in turn had to kind of be more authentic myself. And I think a lot of people find JVC to be transformative because in that authenticity, you start learning about what really gets to you, what kind of grabs your heart and inspires you to do something, and that gives you some direction coming out of it. A lot of people come in with some form of study or major that kind of changes or transforms after their year because something else has kind of stirred.
Well, they've learned things about themselves they may not otherwise have learned.
Yeah,
absolutely. So if somebody wants to become a Jesuit volunteer, what do they need to do?
Well,
where do you start?
We have a brand new website as of today, which is fabulous.
Nice.
So jvcnorthwest.org is the place to go. And we have a great we just saw the video that is featured on the website, but we also have a whole section of information called Becoming a JV. And so it tells you basically the timeline, step by step, what it looks like to go through the application process, frequently asked questions, and then we also have some more featured stories of JVs who are serving or have served in the past to talk about what it was like for them to engage at their partner agency. So I think it gives a lot of good information on sort of what the transformation is like, what the service is like, what community life how that can be experienced. So that would be a good first step, would be check out our website and contact our office. We are always happy to have conversations. The interview process is a conversation. It's all about mutual discernment, finding what fits best for them and for us. So,
so are there ways for the community to be involved besides becoming a Jesuit volunteer? I mean, do you need other volunteers? Do you need donations? Do you need what can the community do to help?
I was going to mention that as well. I mean, there is a process as well as an agency to apply for a JV, and that can also be found.
So a nonprofit perhaps that wants to partner with you.
Absolutely. Right, and there's a few stipulations like about 35 hours a week of worth of work for a JV to do, and a few of those things. Those are all listed on there, but that's one way as an organization to become involved.
Okay.
There's also a donation page. It's always a need for an organization.
What organization doesn't need donations? Sure.
Yeah, so that's a lot of it, and just it could be just engaging some of the JVs here as well. I mean, there's JVs here locally that if you're really curious, they're interesting folks to talk to, see what their experience is like.
We do have another program that's recently started in Portland called JV Encore, and it's for individuals who are 50 and over who are also looking to engage in service. And they live the 4 values as well, a little bit differently. They're not living in community, and they're putting in 200 hours a year at a placement that they're partnering with. So that's going here in Portland. We're in our second year of the program. We're looking to branch to Seattle and Spokane in the next year or two, but that's going currently. So that's another way to engage kind of outside of the postgraduate younger service.
Yeah, so most of the people are people right out of college.
Most are.
Right?
Many are, yeah.
And so now there's one a little further up there for the people in my age group. So if I wanted to do that, if I want to become involved in the Encore group, I would be partnered, or I would be working with a nonprofit agency.
Exactly.
Who are some of the agencies here? You said Sisters of the Road. That would be one. Is that
McDonald Center, St. Andre Bassett Church. Are some of the local downtown.
A lot of them parallel kind of with some of the organizations that JVs are at as well.
We call them JVEs, so JV Encore members are sometimes in the same placements as our JVs.
Nice. Well, we're just about out of time. Tell me what things have you not told me that we should know about the Jesuit Volunteer Corps?
Well, it is a transforming year that our phrase that we use, both kind of in-house and out, is ruined for life. And you are ruined for life, and that takes on a meaning for each individual as they kind of progress through their year and as they look back on it. And so,
but you're saying it with a smile, so it's a good thing.
It's a good kind of, it's a fabulous kind of ruined. So, you will be ruined for life.
It's just very life-changing, I'm sure. I'm sure.
And it creates a really strong community. I mean, Liz could tell you that. That's a lot of her position. But after your years of JVC, it's pretty incredible to meet these people in some of the most random places.
So people that you were in the community with, other JVs, is that what you're talking about?
Or people never met before that had done the program 8 or 10 years earlier.
Instant kinship?
Absolutely.
There is, and that's really a special thing when that happens. And it happens more often than you would expect.
Wow, that's great. Okay, well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that I've missed here?
No, I think.
Do you ever do fundraising, anything like that?
We do. We have an annual event every year in Seattle, and we've got a great event lined up already for April. And we have a occasional events in Portland as well. So,
okay. And that I assume will be on your website.
It sure will.
Check out the website.
Good,
Absolutely.
good.
Thank you,
Liz. Thank you, Ian, so much for being on here. It was great to hear all about the Jesuit Volunteers Corps Northwest and the Encore group too.
Absolutely.
Thanks for watching this episode of Community Hotline. You've got all the information you need now to find out about SAFPAC or about the JVs, and go to their websites, learn more, and become involved in your community. Thanks for watching Community Hotline. We'll see you next week. Okay.